You're dropped off at a summer camp surrounded by kids you've never met. There's no one to tell you how to act or what to do, just your instincts and the group you're thrown into. Now imagine that slowly competition turns into rivalry, and rivalry turns into hostility. This might sound like the plot of a survival game, but it's not fiction. This is the Robbers Cave experiment, a real-life study of how easily humans divide into groups and how quickly conflicts can emerge. Today, we're diving into the Robbers Cave experiment, one of the most famous studies in social psychology. It's an eye-opening look at how competition, group identity, and cooperation shape human behavior, especially when left to our own devices. In 1954, psychologist Muzafer Sherif wanted to understand what causes conflicts between groups and how those conflicts can be resolved. To study this, he created an experiment disguised as a summer camp. The location, Robbers Cave State Park in Oklahoma. The participants, 22 boys, all around 11 years old, from similar backgrounds, white, middle class, and Protestant, none of whom knew each other beforehand. The boys were split into two groups, each placed in separate areas of the camp, and for the first few days they had no idea the other group existed. At first, everything seemed simple. The boys bonded with their group, coming up with names for themselves. One group called themselves the Rattlers, the other the Eagles. They built friendships, worked together, and felt a sense of belonging. But the experiment wasn't just about team building. Sherif had a bigger plan in mind, to see what would happen when the two groups were introduced to each other and forced to compete. Phase 1. Before the groups even met, something powerful was happening. The boys were forming group identities. The Rattlers and the Eagles became more than just teams. They were close-knit groups with their own rules, norms, and cultures. Each group developed symbols, flags, and even songs that reflected their unique identity. Within these groups, the boys learned to cooperate, to share responsibilities, and to trust one another. It was all smooth sailing until they found out there was another group at camp. Phase 2. After a few days of separation, the two groups were introduced to each other. But this wasn't a friendly meet and greet. Sherif set up a series of competitive games, things like tug-of-war, baseball, and treasure hunts, with the winners getting prizes like pocket knives and medals. The goal? To create rivalry between the groups, and it worked. As soon as the competition started, the tension between the Rattlers and Eagles skyrocketed. What started as friendly rivalry quickly escalated into name-calling, sabotage, and open hostility. The boys began to see the other group as enemies. They raided each other's cabins, stole belongings, and even engaged in physical fights. This stage of the experiment revealed something crucial about human behavior. Competition can turn people against each other, even when the stakes are relatively low. In just a few days, these boys, who were all quite similar in background and age, developed a deep sense of us versus them. The experiment had successfully created conflict, but what Sherif really wanted to understand was how that conflict could be resolved. Could these two groups ever see eye to eye again? Phase 3. To find out, Sherif introduced a new twist to the experiment. He created situations where the boys had to work together to achieve a common goal. These were called superordinate goals, objectives that both groups could only accomplish by cooperating. One of these tasks involved a broken water pipe that cut off the camp's water supply. To get water, both the Rattlers and the Eagles had to put aside their differences and work together to fix the pipe. Another challenge required both groups to pool their money to rent a movie that they all wanted to watch. Slowly but surely, the hostility between the groups began to fade. Cooperation in the face of these larger goals made the boys realize they weren't so different after all. By the end of the experiment, they were eating meals together, sharing jokes, and even riding the same bus home. The lesson: common goals can bring people together, even in the face of intense rivalry. When the boys were forced to cooperate, they shifted from an us versus them mindset to a more inclusive, cooperative one. The Robbers Cave experiment is a powerful demonstration of several key psychological concepts which help explain why we behave the way we do in groups. One of the most important ideas illustrated by the experiment is the concept of in-group and out-group dynamics. The boys in each group saw themselves as part of the in-group, the Rattlers or the Eagles, while the other group was the out-group. This division led to stereotyping, prejudice, and conflict. In the real world, we see this all the time in rivalries between sports teams, political parties, and even nations. Sharif's work is also the foundation of realistic conflict theory, which suggests that conflict arises when groups compete for limited resources. In the case of the Robbers Cave experiment, the prizes for winning the games were the limited resources. This theory helps explain why groups in the real world, whether they're companies, countries, or communities, so often find themselves in conflict when they're vying for the same goals. The final stage of the experiment highlights the power of superordinate goals, objectives that require cooperation between groups to achieve. When the boys were given tasks that both groups had to complete together, their rivalry diminished, and they began to see each other as allies instead of enemies. This suggests that one of the best ways to reduce conflict between groups is to create situations where they have to work together toward a common goal. The Robbers Cave experiment has far-reaching implications beyond the summer camp setting. In fact, its lessons can be applied to various areas of society. Schools and bullying. In schools, kids often form cliques or groups that exclude others, sometimes leading to bullying or hostility between different groups. The Robbers Cave experiment shows how these divisions can be reduced by encouraging cooperation and teamwork. Group projects, sports teams, and school-wide events that require collaboration can help break down barriers and foster a sense of unity. Workplace conflict. In the workplace, competition for promotions, recognition, or resources can lead to conflict between employees or departments. Just like in the experiment, when people feel they're competing for limited resources, they may become hostile toward others. However, fostering a culture of collaboration, where team success is valued more than individual success, can help reduce these tensions. Creating shared goals and promoting teamwork can go a long way in building a more harmonious work environment. Societal divisions. On a larger scale, the Robbers Cave experiment sheds light on how societal divisions, whether they're based on race, religion, nationality, or political affiliation, can emerge and lead to conflict. When groups see each other as competitors for resources like jobs, power, or security, tensions rise and conflict becomes more likely. But as the experiment showed, finding common ground and working toward shared goals can help bridge these divides. For example, in the face of global challenges like climate change, poverty, or disease, people from different backgrounds and cultures may need to come together to solve these problems. Just like the boys in the experiment, when we cooperate to achieve a larger goal, we're more likely to see each other as partners instead of adversaries. While the Robbers Cave experiment provided valuable insights into group behavior, it also raises important ethical questions. The boys in the study were deceived. They had no idea they were part of an experiment. They experienced emotional stress, hostility, and even physical fights, all orchestrated by the researchers. Today, ethical guidelines in psychology are much stricter. Participants must give informed consent and must be aware of any potential risks involved. The Robbers Cave experiment, like many other classic psychology studies, would likely not be allowed under modern ethical standards. However, it remains a critical part of psychology's history, showing both the power of group dynamics and the importance of ethical research. The Robbers Cave experiment offers several important lessons that are still relevant today. Group identity can form quickly, and once it does, it can create deep divisions between people. Competition for resources can lead to hostility and conflict, even among individuals who were previously neutral or friendly toward each other. Cooperation and shared goals are powerful tools for reducing conflict and fostering unity. Ethical considerations are crucial in psychological research, as experiments that involve emotional or physical stress can have long-lasting effects on participants.